am Emmanuel and welcome back to the ISO 27001 series. Today we are diving into the Annex A and we are focusing on the Control 5.13, labeling of information. Now when we talk about labeling, we are saying that we are marking data so that everyone knows its classification. Previous class we talked about the classification, but this time around we are talking about how do we go about labeling it to make sure that it's obvious to everyone. Now we'll walk through what this control entails, why it's important, how to implement it, and how to make sure that your organization is effectively enforcing this control. Plus, if you are transitioning to the 2022 update, this will highlight the changes that actually occur. Now, what is the Annex A 5.13? Annex A 5.13 is all about ensuring that organizations apply appropriate labeling procedures for their information. Now, based on their classification scheme. Now, in simple terms, once you have classified your data, whether your data is confidential, internal, or public, or you have sorted your data by its sensitivity, you need a clear and consistent way to be able to label it. If you haven't already established an information classification scheme, kindly check our 5.12 video, which covers classification in detail. Now, labeling is the next step in protecting your data and ensuring that sensitive information is handled correctly. What is the purpose of labeling? The goal of labeling is in twofold. One, to clearly communicate the classification level of information. So, at a glance, label is supposed to tell you if a file is public or confidential. Now, two, labeling, or the goal of labeling, is to support automated information processing and management, making it easier to enforce security controls and policies. Now, with the 2022 update, there is a shift towards more technical implementation, aligning with obviously advancements in technology. You should know by now that there's a lot of increase or emphasis on metadata now. And when we talk about metadata, we are talking about data or data that is stored in the file. That's what metadata is all about. So whenever you hear, don't get confused about it. And so ISO now is making sure that all those things are taken care of. Now, what is the role of metadata in labeling? One of the most significant updates in the 2022 standard is the introduction of the metadata as a labeling technique. Now, what metadata allows, or what it does, is that it allows classification labels to be embedded directly in the digital files, helping automate security processes. So what we are saying is that the data that is stored in the file is not just on the page, but it's stored in the file. So when you go on the page, you might not see it, but it's stored within a file on that same page. However, this comes with its own challenges. Why? Because every way of storing data comes with certain risks or certain challenges that is involved. First, there's implementation complexity. Adding metadata to all documents can require technical upgrades and additional resources. So you need to know that your technical work and your setup needs to be done effectively. And that is where one of the challenges also lies. The second challenge is that there is security risks. Why? If an attacker gains access to a labeled data, metadata makes it easier to filter out all the sensitive information quickly. So someone finds all those confidential files at once and they can go ahead and destroy it. Then the cost consideration. Now, when you're implementing metadata at scale, it can be very, very expensive. And it may not be practical for smaller organizations. So the cost of the software itself, the setup time, the maintenance, and the people to even manage it might be costly. Now, if metadata isn't feasible for your organization, document this in your risk register, justifying why it's not necessary based on a cost-benefit analysis. And you can be able to see yourself through the certification process. And an auditor will definitely understand you. Now, what is a step-to-step guide to implementing information or information labeling? First, you need to be able to comply with the Annex A 5.13. To comply with that, you need to be able to follow these 5 steps that I'm going to give you. First, you need to be able to develop an information classification scheme. We talked about that in our previous video. You need to be able to define labeling procedures establish how your documents, your emails, and your assets should be labeled. Then the third, you need to be able to train your employees, which I talked about also in our previous video. Then apply labels consistently. Now, when we are saying apply labels, we are saying that use standardized headers, footers, watermark across board so that whenever anyone sees it, they know that, oh, this is the kind of data you are talking about. Then the last one is you're able to monitor and review compliance. Conduct periodic checks to ensure that labeling is being applied correctly within your environment. Now, what are some of the common labeling techniques that you find yourselves in? Now, different organizations use different approaches. Some use headers and footers to be able to do that. Some use watermarks. Some use document properties. Some also go by the physical labeling. Now, what are some of the mistakes that you need to be able to avoid? Now, 3 things that I want to advise you that you need to be able to avoid when it comes to labeling. First, failure to label information. Now, if documents aren't labeled, employees will mishandle them, which will lead to a potential data leak, because if they don't understand the kind of data, or they don't know that, oh, this is sensitive data. If you don't know poison and you think poison is water, you are going to drink it. And so you need to be able to understand that very well. Now, inconsistent labeling across teams. You need to make sure that all your organizations are doing it the same way. Why? Someone might work in the finance department and move all the way to the IT department. If the labeling is not consistent, they might think that the type of labeling in finance is the same. So you need to be able to ensure that you are promoting that uniformity. Then the lack of current control. Keep track of changes in your documents to make sure that classification remains accurate. And these are some of the things that you need to be able to make sure that you are doing to help to be able to pass your audit. Now, what are the auditors looking out for when they come in? Now, during an ISO 27001 audit, auditors will first check the evidence of a documented classification scheme and the labeling procedures. They will also check the consistent application of labels across different formats. Then they will also the employees' awareness and training records that are related to labeling. Then the fourth one, the final one, is the justification for not implementing metadata if it is not in use. You need to provide evidence to why you are not doing that. I hope this makes more sense to you. In this video, I'm sure you've been able to successfully know how to implement Annex A 5.13 just to make sure that you are ensuring that you have a well-defined classification scheme. You apply consistent labeling techniques. You train your employees on how to be able to go about labeling procedures. Then they consider the use of metadata. If not, have a justifiable excuse on why you're not doing that. Thanks for watching. Stick around. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next tutorial video with the ISO 27001 series. Thank you.